Today is Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Israel cuts off foreign aid to Gaza. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating. You can email us your thoughts as well. quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We're getting through the news of the Cray here each and every weekday, bright and early. We're so glad you're with us. Joining me today to get through it all, CBN's Madison Seals and Trey Goins-Phillips. And a lot to get to, as always. On the focus story, a Christian couple in India has a crazy story going on.
Yeah, they were recently released from prison after being sentenced to 5 years for attempting conversion, but they have a long way to go in their fight for freedom still.
All right, looking forward to the details there. And Trey, on the main thing, you caught up with Chris Tomlin.
Yeah, so Chris Tomlin is stepping into the executive producer role for a new movie coming out. So we talked about how that came about and also how he saw God working in the midst of it.
All right, looking forward to that conversation with Chris Tomlin coming up. And we are going to get to the news in 90 here in just a moment. But first, we're going to pause 30 seconds to hear from our sponsors of this podcast episode, our friends at The Chosen.
Let me tell you, the God's gonna cut you.
It's Holy Week in Jerusalem, and the city is restless. The people of Israel welcome Jesus as king, his followers ready for revolution. But instead of taking the throne, Jesus turns the tables.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees! How will you escape being condemned to hell?
Experience Holy Week like never before.
What have you done?
Coming soon to theaters, The Chosen, Last Supper. Get your tickets now.
All right, and with that, we are going to head to the news in 90 seconds. And Israel has cut off humanitarian aid and goods into Gaza, citing Hamas's diversion of supplies for military use. Officials claim Hamas seized aid meant for civilians, using it to sustain its quote-unquote terror machine. The U.S.-backed plan by the Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff proposed a two-phase hostage release, with Israel agreeing to the terms. However, Hamas refused, leading Israel to take a harder stance. If Hamas does not end up compromising, Israel plans to mobilize up to 400,000 reservists through May 2025 for a total war against the terror group. The Trump administration is expediting $4 billion in military aid to Israel, reversing previous delays under Biden. Recently freed hostage Eli Sharabai revealed captives were starved, eating just 250 to 300 calories per day. Trump has invited him and other hostages to meet at the White House this week. Massachusetts parents are appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court after a federal court ruled their daughter's school could hide her gender identity change from them. The First Circuit Court upheld the school's policy, dismissing the parents' claim that it violated their rights under the 14th Amendment. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out those stories and more over at cbnnews.com. And guys, this story in Massachusetts, you thought the pendulum might be turning a little bit, then you see this. And this is after school staff secretly addressed an 11-year-old by a new name and new gender identity, communicating with her about it via text and online chats. That's honestly, regardless of what they're even talking about, that alone is concerning to me, that school officials are feeling it's appropriate to get online and hit up an 11-year-old in their DMs and have a text chat or a instant message chat. That's troubling to me, and it's also troubling that the court sided with the school here.
Yeah, I mean, I think this story all around is just honestly disgusting, right? Because we've moved past the point of maybe we just have a difference of opinion, and there are people who are trying to do what they think is right in this public school situation, and then parents are trying to do what is right, which is obviously what is right, protecting their children and their natural bodies as male or female, whatever it is. But I think we've moved now into an offensive level, right? Like I know what I'm doing is problematic and I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to clandestinely try to communicate with this minor child, knowing that I shouldn't be doing this, right? You should not be communicating as an adult with a minor child via text. But obviously they knew that it's a problem, right? Because they're intentionally communicating via text. They're not going through the natural channels of talking to a parent, arranging a meeting. They're having these conversations privately. So at some level, they know what they're doing is something they ought not to be doing, and they're doing it anyway. And I think to any parent, that should be concerning to see authority figures acting that way.
Yeah, it's really hard to imagine where the other side is coming from on this because wherever you stand on the parental rights issue, everyone should be able to agree that you want the best for the child. And who knows their child better than the parents? I mean, the 14th Amendment protects parental rights. The Supreme Court has ruled that parents have a fundamental right to make decisions about their children's care and upbringing. So, yeah, it is concerning, especially when you see not just that the school is hiding something, but that they're communicating with the child through means like texting and email and things like that. But I mean, that's exactly where this slippery slope leads when you take parents out of the equation entirely.
Yeah, it really does. And it's that mindset, a sort of progressive mindset that says, you know what? These children belong to the community and it's our responsibility to raise them. And that's quite troubling. And it's not what the Christian worldview would teach at all. In fact, we believe that these children we also believe they're not ours, but we believe they're God's and God has entrusted them into our care. And so therefore, we're the ones that should steward over them these decisions, and the school coming in and swooping in. They have absolutely no right to do that, yet they are trying to claim this right in more and more instances. So very, very troubling indeed. We're going to head over to the focus story now, and a Christian couple in India, as we were just hitting on at the top of the podcast here. They've been released from prison, but how did they end up sentenced to prison in the first place?
Yeah, so this happened in Uttar Pradesh, which is in northern India, and a Christian couple named Jose and Shia Papuchan were accused and then convicted of trying to coerce individuals into converting to Christianity. And they were convicted on January 22nd under the state's anti-conversion law and the Prohibition of Unlawful Conversion of Religion Act, which entailed fines of about $300 each, but up to 5 years in prison. And we learned more of the details about their alleged crimes during their trial when officials claimed that the couple orchestrated a large-scale effort to convert people who were considered to be at the bottom of the caste system, which is the social hierarchy in India. And officials specifically pointed to an event on Christmas Day in 2022 when the couple was allegedly trying to convert people, which was just based on eyewitness accounts, apparently. And the couple presented their defense in court, saying that they only promoted education and they organized community meals and distributed Bibles without compelling anyone to change their beliefs. And they were released on bail last month, but they weren't released from prison until weeks later. And they're still waiting for acquittal, which is expected to take a long time.
And where does this process go from here? I know some of these laws can be vague and it can be troublesome as they go through the courts, but where does this look to be going?
Yeah, vague is a good word to use to describe these laws because, yeah, they're definitely not out of the woods yet. And in some ways, this is uncharted territory because according to a local source, this is the first reported case of conviction under the state's anti-conversion law. One source says that this process can take years because of the poorly defined nature of these laws, which now allow for third parties to get involved in reporting suspected conversion attempts. So that means Christians will be largely targeted and have been largely targeted. There's at least 80 other Christians in prison in the state under similar charges as this couple. And a group called United Christian Forum has documented over 800 incidents of threats or attacks against Christians across India just last year. And the group's national coordinator, AC Michael, monitored many of these, and he said that he doesn't believe that conviction for a suspected attempt to convert will actually stand up in court, ultimately because these anti-conversion laws are vague and unconstitutional, but it doesn't mean that the state's not going to try. And 12 Indian states have these anti-conversion statutes and that broadly define prohibited activities, which means that almost all forms of outreach or evangelism are basically under scrutiny. And since Christians represent only about 2.3% of India's population, while Hindus constitute around 80%, that means that these laws are continually weaponized against Christians. And that makes the work of Christian missionaries like this even more convicting and inspiring because they know the kind of oppression that they're up against and they're choosing to do their missionary work anyway.
Yeah. My one of the states here that these laws are in play is Odisha. And that's one where my church, my home church here, supports some mission work there, translating the Bible into certain languages that it's not been translated in before over there. And, you look at that and then I'm looking at these laws, Madison, as you're talking, and it's crazy because it's like they treat it like an attempted murder or something like that. But listen to how it goes. It says all of these laws seek to prevent any person from converting or attempting to convert, either directly or otherwise, another person through forcible or fraudulent means. Okay, you could say, all right, that doesn't sound good. But then it says, or by allurement or inducement. So like you can't present a solid argument to somebody. It might allure them into it. It might be and it might induce you to change your mind. Like, I mean, that's just a crazy, that it's so, it's almost insidious how vague those are that they can use that. Because, I mean, you can see in that wording that you could apply that to almost anything. Almost any argument that you put in there could fall under allurement or inducement. And so, man, that is really troubling stuff. We definitely need to be praying for that couple there and everybody else who's subject to these laws.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these laws are intentionally vague, right? We've seen in so many countries, India in particular, but several others, where Christian persecution is not the conventional persecution that we're used to. It's these kind of nefarious ways of going through back doors and finding ways to persecute believers, whether it's withholding resources in times of need to Christian communities or stuff like this, whatever. There are all kinds of different ways that our brothers and sisters are facing persecution. But I think something that is in a way encouraging is that I think these instances of persecution just show the veracity and the truth of the gospel in different ways, right? Because these Christians are doing nothing but helping their communities, and they are facing the most intense persecution often in a lot of situations, whereas other religions that have radical factions to them, they're not facing the kinds of persecution that Christians are facing. And I think that it's because, we worship, of course, the one true God. And I think that is an offense to our culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Madison, final thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. It's powerful, the work that they're doing there. And I think a lot of times we look at developed places in the world like this and we just assume, and they actually do have protections for religious liberty in place there. It's just being defied through these kind of broad and vague laws. But it just shows that the gospel is still needed even in these places that are very aware of it. And it's going to be under attack for as long as we're here because, like you were saying, Trey, it's a threat to evil.
Yeah, it is. And like you guys were saying, it's one of the crazier places. Minority Christians are definitely a minority there. But there's a lot of violence towards them. And it's really a dangerous area to be a Christian in a lot of areas inside of India, obviously a large country, but certainly not always a safe haven at all for Christians. And so we definitely need to be praying for our brothers and sisters in Christ over there. So appreciate you bringing that story to the radar today, Madison. And coming up here in just a moment, Trey's interview with recording artist and worship leader Chris Tomlin. That's in 30 seconds.
Let me tell you, the God's gonna cut you.
It's Holy Week in Jerusalem. Crowds welcome Jesus as king. Rebellion is in the air.
Jesus operates outside our jurisdiction.
Rome will descend on us all.
But instead of taking the throne, Jesus turns the tables.
My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of thieves.
The world will never be the same. Coming soon to theaters, The Chosen Last Supper. Get your tickets now.
All right, looking forward to that. And on the main thing, Chris Tomlin recently joined Trey to talk about his executive producer role in the upcoming movie, The Last Supper, and how it was clear to him God was behind the making of the film that's debuting in theaters on March 14th. That's today's main thing.
Chris Tomlin, thank you so much for being here with us here at CBN News. How are you, my friend?
Man, doing great. Thank you.
Well, it's good to talk with you, and it's always exciting when I can talk to somebody doing something that is not necessarily in their wheelhouse, or it's not in the vein that everybody in the public kind of sees you in, right? Everybody knows you as the recording artist, the worship leader, but you're stepping into an executive producer role with this new film, The Last Supper from Pinnacle Peak. So tell us, one, a little bit about the film, but two, how did you get hooked up with this?
It's a great question. I remember seeing when on the trailer, and it says from executive producer Chris Tomlin. I was like, what is going on right now? You're talking about out of my wheelhouse, but really excited, man. Excited about this. For me, it always kind of starts with the music side, and we were talking music and that kind of thing, and then saw the film, and I was like, wow, this is incredibly powerful. And this was, hey, could this work? Could there be a partnership here and like come alongside and be a part of helping get the word out on this, help people help us see it. For me, I've never done this before, as far as like my music's been in films and my music's been in things, but like partnering and like, okay, helping carry this to the people like this, I've never done before. And so it's important to me, it's not just picking a film here. I was really moved by it and thought this is powerful. People need to see this. I thought it was unique. That it was the Last Supper. It's usually any song, anything about Jesus is going to be the cross or the resurrection. That the focus on the Last Supper, obviously the cross and the resurrection is in there because that's all around that. But just the powerful story, the way the story is told, but it's also so accurate. It's so biblically like right on the money, and that was important to me. Like I'm not going to just get right. Like I'm not just going to dive in right to something that I didn't feel like. Okay, I feel like this is right on Scripture. This is right on the nose, and it wasn't taking all these liberties of what they maybe thought, maybe adding things in. It's just like it was just telling the story in such a beautiful way. And then I have this song, "No Greater Love," that I had written, and we're thinking about it, and they were like, man, we have these songs that kind of fit this movie, that could fit like the movie. And I said, well, and I played a couple songs, and I got this one that I just wrote, and no one's heard it. No one's heard it, and played it for them. They're like, and I had not seen the movie when I wrote the song, and I was like, it just went like perfectly with this movie. And I was like, okay, this feels like something that's right. And so all those things coming together was like, I'm in.
Yeah. You mentioned the way that we consume scripture when you're seeing it visually is different than when we're sitting and reading the Bible. Obviously, we know that the word is alive and active, as scripture says. So it's still, of course, impacting us in the most important ways, but it still is a different experience when you're experiencing it and understanding it through a different medium like film. And I just want to ask, as somebody who's been on the front lines of recording as an artist and leading worship, and then now stepping into this role, how do you see the technology and these new medias coming in and telling the story of the Bible? How do you see that changing the ways that we share and interact with the gospel, especially with our unbelieving friends and family?
I think people are just wanting, and whether they even know it or not, are longing for this content. I'm seeing it like this, just of something that fills them with faith, something that points them to a greater meaning in this world, right? And people are longing for that anyway. But I've always said this about music, especially about my worship music, is that it's really more about seeing than it is singing. When I'm doing music, I'm trying to help people see more than I'm helping them sing. When people can see God's goodness, when they can see His grace, when they can see His mercy in a song, when they see it, in their hearts, it helps them sing. It helps them respond. And so, how much more with a film like this, where you're really seeing it, and that it brings it to life. And I think what's so powerful about this is this medium, this way of media, this amazing tool that we have to share God's love with people, that people who will never walk into a church or like, that's not for me, can see this and just have 2 hours to sit and be immersed in this and be immersed in this world, in this story. And when it's told in such a compelling way, and that when you see people, like when you see Peter, and you're like, who can't relate with him? Especially what believers can't relate with him? Just like, I got all this faith, and there's nobody ever going to mess with you, Jesus. And then an hour later, he's like, I don't know who he is. It's like, I mean, that's, and then you got Judas, and this movie really shows the character of Judas, and like him, like wanting something completely different than what Jesus was talking about, and betraying Jesus, and how much have felt that. All those things, you're like, you see it, you brought into it, you're like, this is more than just a little story on a page. There's something powerful about the table to me.
Yeah.
That's a powerful image. And obviously, it's something as believers we've done for 2,000 years now. Almost every Sunday, at my church, every Sunday, we take the sacrament of the communion, right? Of the bread and the wine. And you're like, and you can do it so much where it just becomes, this is what we do. But man, when you're reminded of like this moment when Jesus said, hey, this is what I came for, and he breaks the bread and he holds the wine. This is why I came. This is what it's all about. And and the disciples not getting it, they're like, what is he talking about? And powerful. And I think the invitation for people, it's an inviting. I think about, Trey, I think it when I was thinking about the table, it reminded me of Revelation, when Jesus in Revelation, these words are in red, it says, Jesus said, I stand at the door and knock. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anybody will open the door and let me in, I will come and dine with them and have fellowship with them. And I was thinking, man, the invitation at the table, right? You got the Last Supper, but there's also, hopefully people are drawn to this invitation of, man, I just want that Jesus is still saying, man, I want relationship with you. I want you to know me.
How have you seen God just actively moving and kind of affirming your role in this film?
That's the big one, man, because I've written this song. You will love this. A little backstory of the song. I had written this with some guys that write country music, and you would probably know one of them, Tyler Hubbard, Florida Georgia Line, and like some and the two really like top songwriters in country music. We got together to write. They were doing a little writing retreat, and they're like, man, we want to write a worship song with you. And I was like, and they're like, and they're like, we want to write something on no greater love than this, that a man lays down his life for his friends. There's no, and I was like, oh man, I love that. And we worked this song, and we wrote this at Ernest Hemingway's house. It's a national landmark, and you can go and write at this home in Idaho. And so it was like this writing retreat, and it was all, the setting was amazing, and we were just writing, and this song came to be, and I was like, wow, this is powerful. And so I made a little demo of it, and then when this movie came, and it's like, I mean, line for line, I mean, I was like, wow, this fits so perfectly. And so it was just one of those moments you're like, okay, we're in the flow, I'm in the flow. God is in this. He's like, I'm putting the pieces together. You didn't know us putting these pieces together, but I've got this little plan. And I've seen that, and I'm sure you've seen that in your life too. So much in my life, you're just like, wow, I did not see these pieces come together like this. But you're just trying to be faithful and follow and walk with God, and it's amazing what happens.
Great to hear from Chris Tomlin. We're all very familiar with his songs, I am sure. And Trey, is that one up on YouTube yet? Are we able to see that one, the full interview?
So that one's not up on YouTube yet, but it will be this week, and you'll be able to catch our whole conversation, because there was a lot more we talked about, even him just being a worship leader and what he's learned over the years as a recording artist.
Gotcha. So we got a sneak peek on that one. That's great. We'll keep an eye out on the CBN News YouTube channel for that video when it comes later this week. All right, that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing. And Trey, what are we looking at?
Yeah, so we're looking at Proverbs 19:25. It says, fearing people is a dangerous trap, but trusting the Lord means safety. I think that's just a good reminder to run to Jesus as our refuge.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, considering the story of the missionaries in India and persecution of Christians around the world, we know that word safety isn't always a guarantee of our physical safety, but our eternal safety
Right.
through
Yeah.
salvation and trusting that our lives are in God's hands.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely another one of those file it in the easier said than done categories. 'Cause, we all have a certain degree of fear of people, what they can, but they can't take our souls, as you guys were alluding to there, right? They can hurt our bodies, they can physically harm us, but they cannot take and touch our soul. So cling to that. Cling to that. Proverbs 19:25. Good stuff. All right. Get yourself on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective, Lord willing. And that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back tomorrow with more. God bless. See you then.